Hello, my name is Charles Upton. Name of this video is UFOs Are Real, Disclosure is a Hoax. Subtitle, An Answer to and Some Questions for Dr. Steven Greer. Greetings, my name is Charles Upton. In the course of composing my analysis of the recent Netflix original series Top Secret UFO Projects Declassified, I came to a better understanding of how the present UFO disclosure movement is beginning to take the form of an overt attack on religion. In the Netflix documentary, when Mary Rodwell repeated the commonly heard doctrine that the human race was not created by God as an act of divine self-manifestation, but by the UFO aliens as an experiment in genetic engineering. A revelation that Mrs. Rodwell presented as an all but unanswerable challenge to the religious paradigm. One of the presenters in the Netflix series was Dr. Steven Greer, who describes himself as the founder of the Alien Disclosure Movement. He has appeared in innumerable UFO documentaries. My impression of an overtly anti-religious disclosure movement was only confirmed and strengthened a short time after I viewed the Netflix series when I watched an interview with Dr. Greer conducted by Sarah Westall. However, before I get to my objections to some of Steven Greer's inconsistencies, dubious claims, and slanderous attacks on religion and people of faith, I will try to give the reader some idea of how I found myself so diametrically opposed, not to the reality of the UFO phenomenon, which I entirely accept, but to the specific myth of the UFO alien that has been imposed on us over the past 70 years, a position I have come to based on my life experience. I'm soon to be 73, and the insights gained and commitments made over a lifetime of spiritual seeking. I have done my best to analyze and expose this myth in my recently published book, The Alien Disclosure Deception, The Metaphysics of Social Engineering. Can you see that? Yes. It finally came. The last video I didn't have it yet, but here it is. So. As a resident of the San Francisco Bay Area in the 1960s, someone with a traditional Catholic rather than a purely secular background, I was exposed to a number of the Eastern religions who were sending missions to the West in those years. In later life, these influences matured through my association as a writer with a perennialist school of traditional metaphysics founded by French metaphysician René Guénon. One of the central doctrines of this school is that God has sent more than one divine revelation to humanity, and that more than one of these revelations, which are the origin of the Earth's traditional religions, can be enforced at the same time. My acceptance of the validity of these revelations, as well as my entry into Islam and the world of Sufism in 1988, led me in the direction of what was to become, in 2023, the Covenants Initiative, which grew out of my partnership with Dr. John Andrew Morrow. Dr. Morrow has almost single-handedly rescued from historical and scholarly amnesia the covenants of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, with Christian churches and other religious communities, treaties which uniformly command all Muslims not to attack or rob or damage the buildings of peaceful Christians and other peoples of the book, but rather to defend them until the end of time. Out of this rediscovery of the prophetic covenants grew the Covenants Initiative, an international Muslim interfaith peace movement, which might well represent the major ideological counterforce to ISIS and other Takfiri terrorists. Based on my commitment to spreading the knowledge of these covenants in the face of rising anti-religious persecution in many parts of the world, against every religion in one way or another, I found myself as a committed defender of the traditional religions of the earth. And since I had also been writing about the UFO phenomenon and the dubious human activities surrounding it since 2001, it was natural, inevitable in fact, that I would eventually find myself defending those religions against the alien disclosure deception, which has emerged as a direct attack on all of them. An attack sponsored by influential politicians, military brass, elements of the intelligence community, and powerful corporate CEOs. And since Dr. Steven Greer has been an open spokesman for this attack, it is my duty as a believer in God and a follower of one of the revealed religions to respond to it as forcefully as I can. In the Sarah Westall interview, Greer can't say the word religion without spitting venom, without attaching some slanderous or unflattering epithet. Religious nuts, religious lunatics, religious superstition. Apparently almost every religious believer on earth is part of the lunatic fringe, though how this term could be applied to billions of people, the majority of the earth's population, is beyond me. Could projection be operating here by any chance? He is especially scandalized by the concept of good versus evil, since it fosters an us against them attitude that leads to violence. Nothing is more evil than good versus evil, while nothing is closer to the highest good than the rejection of this dichotomy, since this is what will make the earth ready to take its rightful place in the Galactic Federation. When Ms. Westall repeated the claim of an earlier guest speaking on UFOs that the earth is presently overshadowed by an evil being who is identifiable with Satan, Greer became especially combative. In Greer's own words, I'm quoting here, religious nuts deliberately confuse two different things, close quote, namely intelligences with other dimensions, that's a quote, and extraterrestrial civilizations, quote, so that everything that comes roaring out of the ninth frame of hell is automatically an extraterrestrial. This is part of the disinformation, mixing up a whole bunch of stuff. This is exactly what the intelligence community wants to do, because that confusion creates the ability to attach this us versus them narrative that justifies trillions of dollars in work expenditures, weaponizing space. Okay. Greer believes that the UFO aliens are, quote, extraterrestrial biological entities, but bristles at any suggestion that they might be spiritual or paranormal beings. Now, I can see how a portrayal of the UFO aliens as an invasion force from one or more material plane planets in the galaxy might be used by the military or the CIA to justify huge appropriations to expand the Star Wars program and the Space Force. But how the religious belief in a war in heaven between Satan and his fallen angels on the one side and God and his angels on the other could be used to justify the weaponization of space is beyond me, for the simple fact that you can't kill demons with lasers. Can't be done. In any case, it seems like Steven Greer's main beef with religion is the paradigm of good versus evil, and the paradigm of good versus evil is the fear that the aliens will be pictured as demons, whereas he claims that every single interaction between himself and his colleagues and the UFO aliens has demonstrated that they are, no matter what species or civilization they might belong to, entirely good in every way. The proof of their goodness is their fantastically advanced technology, even though an association of moral good with technological advancement is pretty far outside the human experience. As for the often horrendous and degrading alien abductions that have been reported by so many people, he puts these incidents down to the false abductions staged by the intelligence community. All the pleasant abductions are by the real aliens, while all the horrendous ones are orchestrated by the intelligence community for the purpose of giving the aliens a bad name. Greer tells us that the practice of drumming up an us versus them mentality regarding UFO aliens is the road to interplanetary war. But he says this immediately after informing us that the aliens are benign and entirely good, and that the creating of the fear of such a war in heaven is a technique used by the intelligence community and religious lunatics to manipulate the populace. He is now using the identical technique himself. My own position on the nature of UFO aliens is that they are subtle plane paranormal entities, the beings that Muslims call the jinn, substantially identical to the Northern European fairies and the Greek Platonic daimones. Material planes like material plane astronauts like Yuri Gagarin or Neil Armstrong do not materialize and dematerialize before our eyes, walk through the walls of our bedrooms at night, and hand us physical objects that later disappear into thin air. Such phenomena are the stock and trade of another class of beings entirely. Furthermore, as premier ufologist Jacques Vallée points out, the UFOs and their occupants are unlikely to have made the interminable journey at the maddeningly sluggish speed of light through physical space from other inhabited planets because there's simply too many of them. Greer counters this objection by making an interesting distinction between paranormal entities, the jinn, etc., who inhabit non-material dimensions, and various extraterrestrial biological entities who have learned how to travel through these dimensions so as to move from one place to another on the material plane, apparently by a technique somewhat analogous to the transporter technology from Star Trek. But if they travel by dematerializing at point A and rematerializing again at point B, it certainly seems as if the rematerialization process is often far from complete, since they still exhibit many of the common characteristics of regular paranormal spooks: changing shape, appearing out of and disappearing into thin air, altering our states of consciousness, reading our minds, and communicating with us by telepathy, etc. As American Eastern Orthodox priest Seraphim Rose points out, whose ufology was influenced as mine was both by René Guénon and by Jacques Vallée, all these manifestations appear as powers exhibited by the demons summoned by pagan magicians of late antiquity, as recounted in the lives of the Orthodox saints. Dr. John E. Mack, Pulitzer Prize-winning Harvard psychologist and author of the book Abduction, Human Encounters with Aliens, Scribner's 1994, whose hatred of religion, particularly Christianity, resembles Greer's, recounts nearly 100 cases of human abduction by aliens, many of whose victims he personally treated, and lists among the effects on them of such unfortunate encounters, quote, physical and psychological scars of their experience ranging from nightmares and anxiety to chronic nervous agitation, depression, even psychosis, to actual physical scars, puncture and incision marks, scrapes, burns, and sores. He informs us that alien abductors routinely subject their victims to terrifying and humiliating medical-like procedures. They also voyeuristically view them performing sexual intercourse or themselves have intercourse with them. He speaks of broken marriages and alienation of affection between parents and children as among the more common after effects, and says that negative physical and psychological effects persist even in cases where spontaneous healing of chronic or incurable diseases occurs. Furthermore, lest Dr. Mack be suspected of some sort of narrow-minded anti-alien prejudice, the astounding fact is that he thinks that their influence on humanity, by and large, has been good. Okay? And in view of the fact that according to a 1991 survey, between several 100,000 and several million Americans believe they've been victims of such events, Greer's theory that every negative abduction experience is a product of stagecraft on the part of the military and the intelligence community for the purpose of discrediting the positive alien agenda loses all credibility. As for Greer's take on the CIA, it remains ambiguous. On the one hand, he correctly maintains that the agency is not to be trusted because they interfere with the media to spread disinformation. He claims that their purpose in doing this is to set up an eschatological mindset to create conflict and thereby justify appropriations for weapons technology. On the other hand, he criticizes religious nuts for not accepting the pronouncement on the UFO phenomenon made by the scientists connected with the Pentagon, the UFO community, and the CIA. Dr. Greer, in the course of the interview, glibly reveals to the general public the existence of at least 2 classified government projects: abductions staged by the intelligence community. He claims to know the names of the people involved, and clandestine technology based on what he calls transdimensional physics. He claims to have visited the facilities where such research is being carried on. He also tells us that Doug Hopkins, executive director of the Intruders Foundation, was ordered to remove stories of positive alien interaction with humans from his database. This leads one to wonder how Greer could get away with this without adverse consequences, legal or otherwise. Are we supposed to believe that the military and the intelligence community simply don't care if their covert operations are compromised by whistleblowers and take no action whatsoever against them? How likely is that? Dr. Greer has been openly revealing what he supposedly knows about clandestine government operations to the Disclosure Movement for 20 years. Why is he still walking around? Why hasn't he been terrorized into silence? Where are the men in black? Dr. Greer's interview concludes with the disclosure of the development by his organization, the Disclosure Project, of an app that allows anyone to talk one-on-one with a UFO alien. Now, says Greer, we can interact with the Space Brothers directly, not through the government and the military-industrial complex, who are always degrading the purity of alien contact with their lies and agendas. In somewhat the same way, the mass printing of vernacular translations of the Bible allowed us to bypass the Catholic Church's monopoly on Scripture, making possible the Protestant Reformation. Through this miraculous app, we, the people, can now have direct contact with the higher intelligences, at least as direct as an app on a smartphone might allow. In this age of Alexa and Cortana, we obviously have the ability to create pseudo-personalities who can interact with humans as if they were sentient beings. And there are undoubtedly a few people today who actually believe that these helpful phantasms, along with the various demon robots and beautiful female warriors who appear in the video games, are real conscious individuals. This form of interaction, however, is as far from direct contact as I can imagine. The app in question apparently comes with a course in how to communicate even more directly with our alien friends via various psychic techniques that include remote viewing, a form of clairvoyance researched and developed supposedly for the purpose of espionage by the CIA in partnership with the Stanford Research Institute. This app has every appearance of being part of a project for mass mind control, and if the widespread training of the American people in clairvoyance in order to establish psychic contact with alien entities is seriously intended, we can only conclude that it represents something much worse than that, namely mass demonic invocation. Unfortunately for Steven Greer and the Disclosure Project, however, a rival organization known as the To the Stars Academy, headed by rock star Tom DeLonge, an organization that Dr. Greer obviously has little love for, has also developed an app for direct contact with the aliens. According to the emails lifted from the NSA database by Edward Snowden, now available through WikiLeaks, DeLonge exchanged a number of emails with John Podesta and other members of the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign on the subject of UFOs. On one occasion, DeLonge suggested to Podesta that a good person to include in their meetings would be Steven Spielberg. So, I am led to speculate that the Disclosure Project may represent a different faction of the so-called deep state than the To the Stars Clinton faction. We may soon be treated to the highly entertaining spectacle of dueling alien contact apps, each one claiming to put us in touch with the real aliens, the good aliens, while its rival app is condemned as being either a CIA deception or a vector of contact with the bad aliens like the reptilians, those beings that superstitious religious nuts such as myself would call the kafir jinn, the unbelieving jinn. The demons. Be that as it may, I believe that Greer, DeLonge, Michael Salla, and other luminaries of the Disclosure Movement represent elements in a long-term social engineering agenda to transform the worldview of the American people. Further evidence for the existence of this agenda is presented in my book, The Alien Disclosure Deception, The Metaphysics of Social Engineering. Here it is again. See if I can find my camera to see if it's visible. Yeah. There it is. Okay. My own speculation is that the military and the intelligence establishment, unable to explain or control the UFO phenomenon or to make it go away, decided that the next best thing would be to use it to shift the paradigm of American society away from Christianity and democracy and toward transhumanism and Luciferian technology. It's a very interesting thing. This phenomenon is going to keep coming no matter what. And it's very impressive and very mysterious, very powerful effect on people's minds. And so the idea was, well, any ideas, any beliefs we artificially link with this phenomena will appear to be corroborated by the phenomenon every time it happens. See, we get on the train and ride. That was a very smart thing to do if you call something that ultimately stupid smart. At least it was cunning and ingenious. Okay, I will conclude with 5 further questions for Dr. Steven Greer. Question 1. If the Earth will not be accepted for admission into the Galactic Federation if we can't transcend our us versus them attitude, then why have you made it a point to insult virtually every religious believer on Earth, except perhaps Corrado Balducci, exorcist for the Diocese of Rome, who apparently believed that extraterrestrials might act as spiritual teachers for us and publicly stated that they couldn't be demons? You brand them all of us, and I'm going to say them, you brand all of us as religious nuts and superstitious lunatics, largely because our eschatological beliefs cause us to adopt an us versus them attitude. But isn't your virulent hatred for religion and religious believers also an us versus them attitude in itself? Watch out for that, because we won't get admitted to the Galactic Federation if you keep coming up with this attitude here. Question 2. You reject the idea of good versus evil as a false religious superstition. But don't you yourself attribute all the pleasant alien abductions to the good aliens and all the terroristic ones to the evil military and intelligence community? My friend Eric Galati is now involved in reopening some aspects of the Son of Sam investigations, including an inquiry into David Berkowitz's possible involvement in certain satanic networks. According to the religious notion of good and evil, the actions of the Son of Sam killers would be considered to be an example of evil. And the actions of Eric Galati in helping people discover who else beside Berkowitz might have been involved in the Son of Sam crimes, an example of good. Do you reject this evaluation? Is the characterization of the Son of Sam murders as evil and the work of those investigating those murders as good one of the attitudes that might prevent Earth from being admitted to the Galactic Federation? In other words, do we have to become total nihilists before we will be accepted by the Space Brothers? Anybody who's read Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land will remember just how nihilistic the aliens are supposed to be. Question 3, by what means do you communicate with the extraterrestrial biological entities? How do you talk to these people? You say, you and all your friends and colleagues, we talk to them all the time, and they're wonderful people. How do you talk to them? Basic, elementary question. Do you meet at designated locations on Earth? Or in their spaceships? Do you talk with them by radio or through some other technological medium? Or by telepathy, as Michael Sala's Exopolitics Institute claims to be doing? Furthermore, do you possess and are you willing to present any evidence potentially capable of convincing rational, objective scientists, if any can still be found, that you and your colleagues are actually in contact with several extraterrestrial civilizations on a regular basis? Scientists who have not already identified themselves as UFO believers and have no connection with the military or the CIA, whom, of course, according to you, we're not supposed to trust. And I agree with you there. All we have now is rumor, hearsay, a lot of sensationalistic History Channel documentaries, and your own word for it. Can you provide us with any concrete, verifiable evidence of the real existence of EBEs and their actual ongoing communication with human beings? Or is this just a story that keeps getting told and told and told so many times, so many places in the media that finally it becomes accepted simply because people are too tired of trying to maintain their hold on reality? It does take energy, I'll tell you. Question 4, you say, that the Crown Prince of Liechtenstein told you on one occasion that he was funding research into the UFO abduction phenomenon, which is actually not being perpetrated by aliens, but rather represents a covert program of the military, because it would, quote, scare people and convince people that we needed to have an Armageddon-like war in space that would force the return of Christ. Do you have any idea why the prince would openly admit to you that he was involved in a program designed to deceive the public? And why, do you have any idea why you seem to have suffered no repercussions from revealing it? And how many people, Christian or otherwise, actually believe that a shooting war against space aliens would somehow make Christ come back? Where did that come from? Question 5. How do you explain the involvement of so many members of the military and the CIA, some retired, in the disclosure movement as anything other than a major influence on that movement emanating from the military and the CIA? Are all these people whistleblowers who have turned against their employers? If so, how have they been able to act with impunity, sometimes for many years? Where are the men in black? Okay, you want more of this kind of stuff? There's the book. Thank you.